seeing Eichel's father, right? Which was another area I was particularly worried about descending into sort of melodramatic kitsch, and yet keep it honest to who I thought the character was, because he thinks about these things, he's not unreflective, he cares about them, and he's trying to process them, but he also has to maintain a distance from them to be able to just get through the telling of the story. And I've been reading a lot of sort of nonfiction short pieces written by veterans, and I sort of borrowed that kind of sentiment from some of them, that approach to telling the stories. Because some of the things that happen, they're not just bad. They're also, in some way, sort of sacred to the individual, right? Like serving with somebody who died. It means a lot. It means really, you want it to mean when you tell it to somebody more than you can even express. And it's very important not to cheapen it, not to overly dramatize it. And so that sort of bare recitation of the facts is a way of getting at that difficulty, right? Not simply the degree to which you want to protect yourself from dealing with memories that are really painful, but also the fact that you want to be honest. You want to express something true because it's too important not to.
Like you said, use the term distance, the narrator is distant from the experience, but I wouldn't call it indifference.
Right.
Like, he's saying being honest is kind of telling the facts how it is. There's just something in my mind.
Exactly. He's telling the story because it's very important to him. And at this point, this is how he's able to tell the story. Right?
One of the things we discussed a lot when we were talking was why the narrator chose to shoot his dog instead of letting him be taken to the vet. And you said from the beginning you felt like you had this deep psychological understanding of your narrator. So I was wondering, to go back to your writing process, was that something you felt you had hashed out in the very first outline, in that very loose framework, or was that something that evolved over your drafts? How he ended up feeling like that's what he needed to do?
Yeah, I actually he shoots the dog from the beginning. I originally had a whole bit explaining that, right? And like I had Marines who like grew up in the sort of household where like when you didn't bring the dog to the vet, like why would you bring a dog to a vet? I've got guns and there's shovels to bury him. Like what's the point, right? And that was like their upbringing, and I had a whole line about like I wasn't. I didn't come from one of those households, I didn't come from the sort of, my dad wasn't the sort to give us the, we took Rex to the old dog's farm bullshit that they give kids if they want them to grow up to be pussies. And I cut that line, and I just sort of thought, he's the sort of guy who the dog needs to be put down, he's going to do it himself, right? And I still imagine that that's true about the narrator, right? But I didn't want to put it in the story. I didn't want to belabor the point. And I felt it worked better if it wasn't entirely explained. It was sort of this need that he had to do it, that in part came from who he was originally, but there's also he doesn't want somebody else killing the dog, right? There's something, If there was somebody dressed, I kept in the line about, you know, you pay some stranger $100 to kill my dog.
Yeah.
And there's something about handing the dog over to some random person that feels wrong to him. And he wants it done right. It's very important to him. You see, so. But yeah, I didn't. I didn't want it to be too clearly explained because maybe he doesn't necessarily understand it himself, right? And the wife thinks that it would be better if he didn't do it. And maybe she's right. She's probably right. But she also doesn't, she's not going to stop him if that's what he feels like he has to do. And I guess from who the narrator was, and he's got a sort of feeling of self-sufficiency about him in what he does. He's not looking for help through this transition. He's struggling, but he's going to do this on his own, and dealing with the dog is a part of that.
There's this very powerful ambiguity about whether it's an intimate or detached experience when
Right.
he decides to kill the dog. And everything you just said definitely affirmed that for me. So I was wondering whether, in the end, his decision was more of a symptom of this maladjustment, or whether it was a cathartic thing and something that would be necessary for him to finally tell the story.
Whether shooting the dog was good for him or not. Well, what do you guys think?
I've been grappling on it. I just had some
Yeah.
questions.
I guess I thought it was not a good sign. I saw it as more of an example of a disconnect from his wife. What I imagined, since they alluded to the dog being sick, I imagined, the wife had a relationship with the vet. It wasn't like a complete stranger, but that I felt maybe this is how he's connecting again, that it has to be through violence to the dog that he loves. So.
I thought it was at least somewhat positive because it's something that he feels like he actually has control